Hi, and welcome back to Behind the Beacon. This is a conversation between myself, Daralyse Lyons, Chief Revenue Officer, and publisher and owner, Emily Smith. Hi, Emily.
Hi.
We're really glad to be coming back for another episode. I've been enjoying these conversations, and I've been learning more about the industry, and I don't know. Emily, how about you?
Yeah, I've been enjoying these conversations. I don't think we are so busy with our day-to-day work grind that I don't think we actually ever get to talk about the nuts and bolts as much as we do in these conversations. So while we're giving people the behind the scenes, it's actually, I think, really valuable for us.
Yeah, right. Because we are a virtual newsroom. We're not working in the same office. We're not having those, whatever coffee cooler coffee/water cooler. My brain just combined. And also, I think that the philosophy drives the strategy. And so it can be really easy to be either caught up in so caught in the weeds that we don't get a sense of the big picture, or to be so caught up in the big picture that the implementation doesn't always happen. Yeah. So before we hopped on this conversation, we were talking a little bit about revenue and about recurring monthly contributions. And I think, Emily, let's just step back for those listening or, watching this and talk about how reader revenue drives the beacon, or how we'd like it to drive the beacon. So can you talk a little bit about what reader revenue is and how we currently utilize that and where there might be opportunities for growth?
Yeah. So reader revenue is that button, the support the beacon button on our website. It's buckscountybeacon.com/contribute. And then on that page, you can choose to be a monthly contributor or a one-time contributor, and then for various dollar values. And we have had that on our website since April of 2022.
Okay.
So that's four years ago, almost exactly, that I launched our reader revenue program. And the idea behind it is that in the olden days of newspapers, you subscribed to the newspaper.
Right.
You had a weekly, monthly subscription. The newspaper got delivered to your door. And that has gone to the wayside.
Right.
And the way to pick up that revenue to drive our ability to report is to create that without paywalling people. Lots of the hedge fund owned corporate newspapers still do subscriptions. They do online digital subscriptions rather than or in addition to the print subscriptions. And they tell you that they've written a story and then you don't get to read it until you pay them. And we don't like that model because we think information is valuable. And we think that our readers deserve to read it, whether they can afford to read it or not.
Right.
But we still need to pay for it.
Yeah. Well, and I think just to build on that, there's a difference between, I don't know, let's say we do a profile of a community member and they share with their grandma or their cousin who lives in California, hey, the Beacon wrote a story about me or whatever. It would be great for those people who are maybe external to the community to be able to read a Beacon article as a one-time thing. I think for me, how I feel about reader revenue is if you consider the Beacon your news organization, if that's a place where you go as your primary news source or even secondary or tertiary news source, but you're regularly going, making a recurring contribution, if you can afford it, if it's accessible to you, it's a value add to you to keep the Beacon going and providing you with valuable news and information.
Right.
And it's a value add to us, because the more people that provide revenue, then we can pay our freelancers, we can pay, our editor, we can make sure that our social media happens. Yeah, right. Our tech, etc. So it's sort of I always tell people when I'm out in the community, the Beacon works for the community. Like that
Yeah.
is where we're rooted, and so it does become a symbiotic relationship. Yeah. And I think even if maybe 10 or 20% of people, we crunched the numbers the other day, Emily, and even if 10 or 20% of people donated on a recurring basis, like that would help us tremendously.
Yeah. Yeah, it would help us tremendously. And it is when I first started the Beacon and I was doing the business plan, one of the main things that I looked at was how we can figure out how many recurring revenue people will have and how that number grows with our audience. And then secondarily, how you offset churn.
Can
So,
you define churn for anyone who isn't familiar with
yeah.
that?
Yeah, so churn is kind of a tech term, but generally the idea is no matter what let's call it a subscription, even
Mhm.
though it's, I mean, it's a monthly recurring contribution, but it works just like a subscription as a service.
Yeah.
Everyone has a subscription as a service now. You've got, Netflix, Hulu, I don't know, DoorDash, like you
Yeah.
name it, everyone's got some subscriptions that they're paying for. And one of the main metrics is people cancel their subscriptions
Or their credit cards expire.
or their
And
credit cards
I mean,
expire.
there's so many different things that can happen. But yeah, right.
Right. So the churn is the percentage that falls off
Mhm.
over time. And the goal is to increase the number of subscribers while decreasing the amount of churn.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's the metric that we're looking at. And the more churn you have, the more subscribers you have to get. So if you can decrease churn, you don't have to get as many subscribers, but it's all a balancing act of keeping those numbers level, which is why we like monthly recurring revenue rather than not. I'm not saying people shouldn't give us money
Give us both. Do both. Do both.
one,
Do all. Right.
but
Yeah.
to be able to plan for our coverage, our operating costs, all of that stuff, it's important for us to know that we have money coming in and we can expect to know generally how much that is.
Yeah, and I think I want to just take a moment because I used to be a freelance journalist. Prior to that, I had a job, a finance job, and I worked in the business world. So I was not familiar with the news industry. Even when I came to journalism, I worked as a freelancer and I was doing other things, and so I didn't really know how things worked. But I think it's important for people to understand, especially people who've been following the news for a long time, that like the whole model has changed. So it used to be that advertiser dollars really supported and sustained a news organization. Advertiser dollars plus subscription revenue plus like circulation, which is just if people kind of have gone to the grocery store and they see a newspaper sitting there and buy,
Right.
a newspaper $1 at a time or whatever, that's what that is. And so that used to be the model for news organizations. That is no longer a sustainable business model. And the last statistic I read, 2.5 newspapers were closing across the country every week because that model just doesn't work. It doesn't keep news businesses operating. So now we've talked about this a little bit. Organizations that are vibrant and healthy require a wide range of revenue streams, and that's my job as chief revenue officer. So it's grant revenue, it's contributed income, individual funders who give maybe at a higher level. We have funders who give $10,000 or $20,000 or more per year to keep the Beacon going. We had advertising revenue, you know, event sponsorships and various partnerships, and then reader revenue, which is what we're talking about now, which is everyday people like you and me who just say, this news organization is important to me. Maybe I don't have the capacity to write a $10,000 check. That's not in my wheelhouse or my budget, but I do care about this. And for the price of a cup of coffee every month, I want to donate to the Beacon, so for $5 a month or $10 a month or whatever, I care enough about this news organization to make a recurring contribution. And so I think it's just important for people to understand, because I didn't, uh, if I weren't in this industry, I wouldn't really think my $5 or $10 a month would make much of a difference. I would think, well, yeah, but they've got ads, they're announcing their grants, etc. But we
Yeah.
need all of those boxes to be checked in order to sustain the work that we do. And then to your point, Emily, to plan for the future. Because if we get a grant or even a one-time donation, those things are one time, and we can't really budget based on those, because like there's only a limited amount that you can go back to the same well for funding. And there's a limited number of funders.
Yeah, and a lot of times they're restricted funds.
Yes. Can
Yeah.
you talk like, so restricted funds are funds earmarked for a specific purpose. So for example, we got a grant funding from the Fund for Investigative Journalism. So grateful for that opportunity. We're so excited about that. And it was earmarked for a specific reporting series. So what that means is that we can use that money only for costs associated with that specific reporting series, which we sort of project in advance, and we give the Fund for Investigative Journalism our expected costs, and then we spend money against those things, then we have to reconcile at the end. So we can't, if we have to pay a freelancer or whatever working on a different project, we can't use that money to do that. We can't use that
Yeah.
money to drive social media. Like we can
Yeah.
only use that money for what we've promised to use that money for.
Right. Or someone's laptop breaks or
Right. Yeah. Any
mileage,
number of things. Right.
not
Yes.
related to that story. Like,
Yeah, right. And
yeah.
so, which is why sometimes we actually make considered choices to not go after certain grant funding, is because we don't have the operational funding to support it. So we might say, we've talked about this on the podcast before, and we've sent this out in the newsletter and made an announcement on our website, but we have a Report for America Corps member reporter starting. And so a lot of my job right now is raising the money to be able to fund that person's salary, which is great. So excited to do that work. And if my time is spent, 20% of my time is spent doing that, that means that it doesn't make sense for us to go for another grant that is a partial grant where we're going to have to raise more matching funds,
Right.
because we just can't do that yet. We're not at that level and that scale. So, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a lot of moving parts and a lot of behind the scenes decisions that we have to make.
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning, like, not only are a lot of those other things restricted funds, but like with the Report for America, you have to raise matching funds. And that
Yes.
takes away time that you could be raising operational funds that
Right.
aren't restricted to anything. And
Yeah.
I am very happy to be getting this new reporter, and I think it's going to be great for us, but it does tie our hands behind our backs sometimes, you
Well,
know?
when you talk about operational funds, we are fortunate in that we have a few funders that will give to us and just say, we trust you to use this money. But a lot of funders don't do that. A lot of the
Yeah.
higher level funders, they want to give to something exciting and scintillating. And so they might give for a reporter grant or to match a investigative journalism project, but they're not really interested in funding my salary or yours, Emily. They're not like, so our
No.
jobs aren't exciting,
No
they
one
are to
wants to
us,
fund our
but
salaries.
right. They don't want to pay for the tech stack, which we talked about. I mean, certain technologically oriented funders do. So one of the huge benefits to reader revenue is that it is unrestricted. It's not earmarked. It's people saying, we love what you do and we trust you to do it. So we're going to contribute to those efforts. And
Right.
I think that is like just such a vote of confidence in us. And I love hearing from donors at every level, but when I first came on board and I sent out an email, just a widespread email to all of our donors, whether they gave $5 a month or whether they gave $500 or whether they gave $5,000, I send them the same email. And I met with some community members who just told me about how much they love the beacon and why they pay us $10 a month to keep the beacon and why they think everyone should donate to it. And like those are some of my favorite conversations because I can see myself in those conversations. I read our
Yeah,
coverage and it helps me in my life in the same way that it, helps just
yeah.
everyday Bucks County residents.
And I would say, like, I mean, I have been all of the pieces of this company, right? I do a lot more than should be my job because
Right.
there weren't other people filling these positions before.
Yeah.
When people want to cancel their subscription, I get an email and they tell me why they're canceling, their monthly contribution. And, you know, more often than not, I'm not going to say a little old lady, but it's someone who is older on a fixed income, whatever. And they say, I love the beacon. And I know $5 a month doesn't seem like a lot, but it's a lot to me right now with the price of groceries going up and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And like that just warms my heart. Like, even though we're losing them, they take the time to tell me why they think it's so important,
Yeah.
and like that they've thoroughly thought about it before they decided to cancel.
Yeah, I love that. And I would say if you're watching this or listening to this and you're thinking about like, that I don't know, I like even just having this conversation, I'm thinking about myself and some of the things that I donate to. And I think I would maybe just scale back. Like, so if I'm donating $10 a month, going to $5 a month or something, because it does make an impact. But the other piece is that we have chosen, as you said, Emily, to keep the beacon without a paywall to make it free for those who need it. And so for those, yeah, myself included. I mean, I go out to lunch more times in a week than I probably should, or drop $20, like at the store because I'm not paying attention or whatever. Like I think
Yeah.
like for me to just make a considered and deliberate choice to, okay, maybe I have one less cup of coffee out or one less month, like lunch a month, then I make a donation of $15 to, an organization that's doing work that matters to me. I think that's like a real way of recognizing journalism or the kind of journalism we do as a public good because it is,
Yeah.
I think it does a public service to the community.
Yeah, I think it does. And, I'm deep in data, right? My mind exists in data, which is evidenced by all of the things I send you. But this is a simple math problem for us when it comes to reader revenue. And while there are individuals behind it, I'm looking at the data and looking at the math, and all I see is how many readers, how many page views, and then how many of those people are contributing and how many of those contributors were losing. And
So let's talk about that. I mean, we
yeah,
have how many readers come to the Beacon each month on average?
let's say 30,000.
Okay. And so if we have 30,000 people, and I know we've thrown out this number in the past, our yearly budget, our yearly expenses are somewhere around $400,000,
Yeah,
probably a little less than $400,000. And so in order for so we have that $30,000 or sorry, 30,000 readers who are coming to the Beacon. Like how many people would we need to give monthly? Because it probably wouldn't be that 30,000 number. I mean, it never is, but
no, no. I mean, and then you have to think about what that dollar amount
yes.
is, right? So when I did original math on this, 4 years ago or whatever, I was looking at $1, $5, $8, $10, $15.
Yeah.
Obviously, you need less people if it's more money, but there's a lower barrier to entry if it's a lower dollar amount.
Yes.
So, the sweet spot is probably $8 a month. If people gave $8 a month, we would do a lot better. And I would say, I'm actually going to look right now because I am curious there is another number that we have uh, that I look at, which is the amount contributed per person on
Mm.
on a monthly basis. And it changes, the average monthly donation amount. And of course, now my My Stripe says no, but it hovers, between $6 and $10 over
Okay.
the course of the amount of people that we have. But our monthly contributors is a pretty small number. Like our total contributors is higher, but our monthly contributors is in the low hundreds,
Right. And
you
I'm
know?
thinking, even if 1,000 people gave $10 a month, that's $10,000, which then times
Right.
12 is $120,000. And I think between our grants, et cetera, like we can easily make up, maybe not easily. I don't know. My job is it's harder. It can be challenging at times, but we can sort of make up that deficit. And I often say, like, if everybody who visited the Beacon in a month gave us $1 a
Right.
month, like we would exceed our revenue goals. So I think that might be just helpful for people listening to this or watching this to think about. Like, certainly don't want anyone to give beyond their level of capacity, but if someone is watching this and thinking, well, my $5 a month isn't really going to make a difference, or they don't really care, like, yes it is. Yeah,
It
yes,
really
yes
will.
it is. Yeah, 100 more
Yeah.
people giving 5 more dollars actually for an organization our size does make a
It
tangible impact.
it really does. So our average spend per customer currently is $7.57
Per
per month.
month.
Mhm.
Right, right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is pretty good, m but our monthly recurring revenue is the number that I'm always looking at because we want that number to be high enough to cover our costs.
Right. And that, like, slightly less than $8 spend per customer, part of the reason that it's not higher is because we have a relatively lean newsroom. I mean, where there's 3 of us full-time staff people and then a few part-time people, but we're probably each of us is doing the work of, like, well, Emily, you're doing the work of maybe 5 people, but the rest of us are maybe doing the work of 1.5 people. And then we have a bunch of freelancers, but, like, we don't have an office. We don't, we've sort of tried to keep our operational costs really affordable, which I
Lean.
think for
Yeah,
me, if I was to hear that as a donor, it would even prompt me to perhaps give more, because I don't really want to be, giving my money to an office building or whatever, but I do want to be
yeah,
giving my money to freelancers, and I do want to be giving my money to an editor, and, like, to keep the news flowing towards me and to keep the culture of accountability in the community. And there's some data about, I think it's either 60 or 80% or something, corruption goes down when there's a news organization that is doing accountability journalism, and that has a seat at the table and that is going to the public meetings, et cetera, that corruption actually plummets. So
yeah,
it's an investment really in the community, because things get worse if there aren't news organizations
yeah,
there. Yeah. Right.
yeah, and I mean, we've been working on a grant application, as we both know, that has led to a bunch of research. And what I think is most interesting about that specific
Yeah.
point is that there can be legacy journalism in the area, but it can be paywalled, right?
Yeah.
So that even if they have really good investigative journalism or accountability journalism, the people aren't seeing it, and then it doesn't have the same effect. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And and
Well, yeah.
and
And
then
oh, go ahead. Yeah.
and then there are the other n- news outlets out there, that
For anyone listening, Emily just made air quotes if they're listening and not
yes, air quotes news outlets
Yes.
that are funded by dark money, corporate interests. You make your claim. There are plenty of different organizations like that who are creating a news product that is not their to hold governments and people accountable, but instead advocate for something specific, and it muddies the waters.
Yeah.
And so it can seem like there's lots of journalism, and there actually isn't.
Well, right. And the other thing, I mean, there's the paywall journalism. There's, what you were talking about, kind of like the biased sort of like
Pink slime.
journalism. Yeah, yeah, right. Journalism. But then there's this other category, which I think for me is the majority of journalistic outlets, and many of these are paywalled. So I guess they fit within that category too. But it's news organizations that used to have far more capital than they currently do, and they just
Yeah.
cannot afford to cover the depth and breadth of topics that they used to. And a lot of these
Yeah.
news organizations, like sometimes they're getting press releases and they're just writing news briefs on the basis of press releases. They're not going out and reporting because they can't afford to, because deaths of 17 journalists and news reporters, now it's like one person trying to do that work, and they just can't be in all places at once. And so I think, and the model, I mean, before coming to work for the Beacon, I worked for a news organization that was a 67-year legacy newspaper, and the community very much supports that newspaper. However, they don't have the dollars to be able to do what they once were able to do. And so that, I mean, the reporters there are doing their absolute best to cover as much as humanly possible, but they can't do everything. Neither can we. We can't do
We
everything.
absolutely can't. Yeah.
But I think that speaks to the need for more news organizations and for community members to really support the news organizations that are out there trying their best to report as much as possible that is pertinent and relevant to voters, readers, workers, who are part of our county.
Right. Yeah, and there's also, like, lots of news organizations end up relying on wire services to
Yes.
get the bulk of their reporting, so it fills out the edges, and, like, we do that. I mean, we have a partnership with the
Yeah.
AP, which thank God for the AP. They're amazing. We're lucky to have this partnership with them, but, like, part of the difference between the AP partnership that we have and some of these other wire services, like, these other companies, they're paying for their wire service,
Yeah.
but then they don't have to pay for 5 reporters, right?
Right.
But with the AP, we actually have a feature that the AP has called Localize It, where they give us the top level story and then ideas on how we can bring it into our community and
Mm,
report the same story, but more fully by getting information from our community members that it will affect them. It it's a completely different product than
yes.
just taking a story from a wire service and putting it on our page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's say, someone is listening to this or watching this and is saying, okay, you got me, you've convinced me. I'm a reader, I'm a viewer, like, maybe making a monthly contribution or increasing my monthly contribution would be of interest to me and of value to the Beacon. But I'm just one person and you need, 1,000 or 2,000
Yeah.
or 3,000 people. How do I make a difference? And is my $5 a month, $10 a month going to matter? Like, what would you say to that person?
If everyone thought theirs didn't matter, it's just like voting, right?
Mhm.
You
Yeah,
vote with your pocketbook, and just like voting, every vote counts, and the smaller the location, the more it counts. And
right,
it's the same thing with newsrooms. The smaller the newsroom, the more it counts. So, people have won elections in Bucks County by a handful of votes.
right.
A
Yeah,
handful of votes.
yes,
And I would say that the same thing is true with our ability to cover news, is that a handful of people makes a big difference for us. I
yes,
mean, if there's 10 people that are giving us $10 a month, that is covering hours of one of our interns, or, like, it's reporting out a story. It's, I mean, we don't really have many stories that we can pay $100 for anymore, but
no, yeah. part of it too, nor do we want to. I mean,
No, we
I
don't want
worked
to.
in the city of Philadelphia as a freelance journalist, and I've also kind of worked on the business side of journalism where people were getting $50 for 3-4 hours of their time to write, a review, or $100 to write a news story, and they were expected to get 3 sources. I mean, for one, that's really devaluing a reporter's time. I'm not blaming any of the news
Yeah,
organizations that pay that. I'm just saying, like, that
yeah,
is what is economically viable for them, but is not sustainable for the freelancer,
yeah,
or that freelancer is going to maybe cut corners. I mean, a lot of journalists won't, because that's who they are and they just really want to do their absolute best work. But if you're paying me, $100 for a story, I'm probably not going to spend as much time writing or reporting. I'm probably not going to spend as much time sort of like fact
researching.
checking or,
Yeah,
researching. My interviews are going to be far shorter because they just want to get my 3 questions answered and get in and get out, because I got to trim this story around and I don't want to get $10 an hour by the time all is said and done. So it really, there is you know, the trickle down effect, I guess is the term, but like there's a domino effect that happens when you have less reader revenue, and there's the opposite domino effect, like an upward spiral, when
yeah,
reader revenue is such that it can support and sustain an organization.
right. Yeah, and I think it's interesting, and this is we've talked about tech stack before. Our reader revenue comes in through Stripe. Stripe is this big payment processor. That is also where we pay our freelancers out of. And my goal for a long time has been to hopefully get enough money into Stripe to pay for the money going out of Stripe, so it never has to. We don't have to
Right.
add money back in to pay our freelancers.
What's that dollar amount per month on average?
Our freelancers, I would say, we're paying between 5,000 and 5,500 a month. I would say
So,
that's
right. And the fact that we have 30,000 people coming to our website every month, and
yeah,
we're not yet at that 5,000,
yeah,
$5,500 number, like that. I mean, that is such an attainable
yeah,
goal.
yeah. It is, right? If there was 1,000 people giving to us instead of 200, mm, and they each gave us $10. Oh shit, that math's wrong. That's big.
Yeah,
That's
no,
big
but I
numbers.
mean, yeah, but so, I mean, that really would look like if we had 500 or 550 people giving us $10 per
If they
month.
gave us $8, it would be 625 people,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
and we currently have 100 and 173 or something.
Yeah. So I was going to
Yeah,
say, if you're watching this or listening to this and you're not giving, like, please consider making a monthly contribution. But it seems like probably if people who are watching or listening to this, the likelihood is they're not giving, because most people are not. It's really fractional, the amount of
it's
people that
very, very fractional. Yeah,
give on a monthly basis. And there are those
yeah,
who give on a yearly basis or a quarterly basis. And, sometimes for tax purposes, that works better for people too. So we certainly don't want
yeah,
to, like, dissuade people from giving on a yearly basis or whatever else. But I think it's important to have those conversations, and just, if you can afford to contribute and the beacon matters to you, do, because it will not only help us continue to do the work that we're doing, but to grow and expand and to serve the community better. I know I have conversations with Cyril sometimes, and he says, I'd really want to do fill in the blank. I'd really want to do this.
yeah,
And we need more equipment. We need more journalists. This is an investigative project, and we'd have to pay the reporter X amount of dollars to do that. And we just can't yet.
yeah,
Yeah. So yeah.
yeah. I think that is the crux of local news, is how do you get enough money to do the things you wanna do, and there's never you never get to fully cover everything, but, of course, we all have wish lists. Cyril definitely has wish lists, and then there's just, basic stuff that we're trying to cover, like Cyril's salary and my salary and Dara's
Yeah.
salary.
Yeah,
Which
that's true.
I'm just talking about, like, with this month of recurring revenue, I'm like, "Can we pay for the freelancers?"
Yes.
You know?
Right.
Like,
Right. Yes.
Baby steps, I'd like to pay for the freelancers, you know?
Yeah. And if
Yeah.
and in order for people to do that, just a reminder, you can go to buckscountybeacon.com and click that support button and sign up for a monthly contribution, and then just, like, you know and thank you. Thank you in advance to anyone
Yeah.
who chooses to do that, because it means so much, both personally and professionally, to us to see not just our investment in the community of Bucks County, but the Bucks County community's investment and belief in us. It's tremendous.
Yeah, and I think that it's an ecosystem that we're trying to build. You
Yes.
know, the value that we bring in civic engagement, for instance, you know, has been and continues to be big for the community, but the community has also brought us the information,
Yes,
you
right.
know, I think it's really important to continue to build the ecosystem and cover our costs, first of
Yeah.
all. But then beyond covering our costs, then we have an opportunity after that to figure out how we can broaden and deepen our connections with the community through, you know, events and, you know, like forums and all sorts of different things, our voter guide. There's lots of things that we do that we're trying to do to enhance the community and the ability for residents to understand what's going on around them. And every time we do that, it costs money. And every time we do that, I think that there's a value to the community and then there's a value to us, you know, because the better we do, the better you do and vice versa.
Yeah, right. If people can connect those dots, and if people know that we're not, our grant funding does not cover our
Mm-mm.
operational costs by and large. It covers other things, but it doesn't we I can't think of a grant that has covered operational costs beyond just maybe like a fractional amount if we're doing an investigative series and it's covering.
I
uh,
had last year, I had a grant called Transformation Tech,
yep, okay.
and that was Association of Alternative News Media, News Weeklies, News Media, and that one actually paid for tech stack,
That's amazing. Yeah.
which was pretty great. That is how we got our ad server and our CRM. So there are but that $20,000 runs out and we're still paying for those things.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. But without the infrastructure, we wouldn't be able to have what we have, and it's affordable to pay, 50, 100, $200 a month or whatever to kind of keep a tech stack going. And so I think that that is important for people to know too. Like, if you want to make a really significant impact at the Bucks County Beacon, reach out to me. My email is Daralyse at buckscountybeacon.com. We can have a conversation about if you want to make a one-time donation that goes towards an area of interest to you that is also of interest to the Beacon, and then sign up for a recurring $10 monthly contribution. I mean, that is a win, 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 win all around. And so certainly I don't want to detract people from giving to a certain thing, whether it be our reporting or our, or
Yeah.
salaries or our social media or, any of the things that we need. And I would be more than happy, and I'm sure Emily would be more than happy to sit down with anyone who's interested in hearing our priorities and just
Yeah.
share those. And maybe that could even be what we talk about next time. Like, what have we been able to accomplish, and what what are we working on in terms of fundraising, in terms of being able to, pay for it and keep the organization going? We have
Yeah.
needs and we have wants. And I think the more that the community members know about those things and help, and see those priorities of ours as priorities of theirs, because it our needs are driven by community members. I mean, the reason we went for that Report for America grant is because community members were saying there is not enough education coverage in Lower Bucks County. And we
Yeah.
identified that need, and we worked to get the funding to be able to deliver them those stories. Ditto with the Fund for Investigative Journalism. I mean, our election coverage has been some of our most successful coverage. I would say our voter guide is just an incredible value add to the community. And then we wanted to do some reporting on election integrity issues, which we're doing in collaboration with Technically, which is another news outlet. But our needs are really driven by community priorities, whether people tell us directly or whether you're a data person. Emily looks at the metrics and says, wow, people really liked this. We should do more of this.
Right, right. Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes. Yes. I've been doing a survey this week in another county,
yeah,
not
yeah.
Bucks, and it has been fascinating. It has been fascinating to see, and that is actually one of my priorities, which we'll save this for another time, but one of my priorities is to create a feedback loop that is more distinct between us and our readers in Bucks County, so that we can survey you and find out what is it that is missing, what's hitting, what's not hitting, what surprises you, it's been fascinating to watch this other survey get answered and see
Right.
what
And it's
what rises
wonderful
to
to do
the
that
top.
work. And right now, I'll just say we don't have the infrastructure to deliver on some reader
Yeah,
priorities or desires because we just don't have the reader revenue to
yeah,
do that. So people can tell us certain things and we might say, okay, yeah, they want a little less of this reporting and maybe we can allocate some of those dollars to reporting in this other area that's of concern to them. But we can make those even exchanges, but we can't do more at
right.
our current revenue level. We can't. I mean,
No.
and we're hoping not to have to do less, but that is, kind of the churn that you talked about for every person that stops giving. If we don't replace that,
Yeah.
we've got to figure out how to get that money
And
elsewhere.
and there is like a crossover barrier in when it comes to these numbers, and that 1,000 person number that you talk about is very much one of those crossover points because as much as it doesn't seem like these things feed each other, they do. 1,000 people starts to sustain, and that number is based on how many readers we have. And if you have 1,000 people that are giving $8 a month, that's $8,000 a month. That's more than the cost of our freelance.
Yeah.
And then we can cover more stories potentially. And then that leads to more readers. And then the more readers leads to more reader revenue and on and on. And it's just as it's the baseline matters, how many people there are on the bottom of that, the bottom of your stack of people that are giving money, and then the ability to add to it is how you actually become, successful in the reader revenue subscription as a service type thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're watching this, listening to this, and you're already contributing to the Beacon, especially on a monthly basis, pat yourself on the back and then maybe think about whether you can increase your monthly contribution by $1 or $2 a month. That will make a tremendous difference to us. And if you're not yet contributing, do go to
Yeah.
buckscountybeacon.com support if you can. And if you can't, just share our content, tell a friend, maybe
Yeah.
make a one-time $5 contribution. Everything is
Yeah.
helpful. I'm excited that we had this conversation. I'm excited to come back next time and talk about what we need, what we want. And maybe we could also report back and see if this conversation made a difference. Like,
Yeah.
just yeah.
Yes.
What's been happening reader
I'll
revenue
I'll put a
wise.
pin in our numbers today, and
Yeah,
then
right.
we can check back, see
Right.
if
Yeah.
we made
But
progress.
thank you so much for joining us. Emily, great chatting with you as usual. But thank you to everyone who hung in there and watched this or listened to this because it means this work means so much to us. And I think we want you to know, like this is us reporting on ourselves. We want you to know what is happening behind the scenes. We want to have as much transparency as possible. So just it means a lot to be able to have these conversations.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Well, until next time. Bye.
Thanks.